Hi and welcome to the second lecture in the UX Design Prototyping course given by the Technical University of Denmark, DTU. And in the second lecture, we're going to look a little at multi-device design. And this is because, as the little guy up here changing colors, which is from the cover of a very nice O'Reilly book by Michael Levin. By now, I think what we need to think about when we talk about lean approaches to designing prototypes is that apps are not these little colored squares which we click on a phone. They are really pieces of logic which exist across a number of devices. Some of them come from phones, some of them will actually pop up on a watch. And how do we make these things connect? So one way of looking at this is to say there are like three different aspects, at least from the point of view of the author of the book. And you can read the first sample here, which is for free. Is that this is really a question of saying what is the consistent aspects, meaning when we move from one device to another, what is the same, so it's recognizable. What are the things which are like continuous, where there's an aspect of time, where there's sort of some sort of synchronization between the things. And the third aspect, that there's not just these two, but a third one which is complementary, where by combining the devices you get something which is larger than the sum of the parts. And let's say something like this DTU webpage here. Again, if we take this lean UX approach to prototyping and figuring out what are the needs and for whom and what is the solution going to provide in terms of value, you could look at it the way that actually what is central here is there's a little video. There's a little video which explains what is this master program about. There are different segments, market segments here. We have international students and we have Danish students. So that's what you could select. And then there are a number of options, and I think the one which says study program is probably the most essential because it talks about the focus areas, what competences could you build up in a program like this. But then if you imagine that you're maybe not seeing this from a web page, you might see this from your phone. There are lots of places where we have more phones than computers, say China. More likely that people will look at it like this. It should still be consistent in terms of recognizable, which means that the main points which we wanted to get across, the video is still up there as the first thing. You can click the video and just watching the video you have an idea about, aha, okay, this is different from a standard computer science master program. Then if you would scroll further down, you would get to the parallel to if you would go horizontally on the web page to the study program. So the study program would just vertically be further down, but it would be recognizable in that sense. If we look at more advanced design patterns like the Google Materials thing, then you could say this is definitely consistent across a number of Google apps where you have this card-based design, where the card is like the container for the information. You have things in terms of typography and so on, which is consistent, it's the same, it's recognizable. But it's definitely also, just within itself, extremely continuous, right? Because you can see it's now starting to group my messages. So this is not your normal email app. This is something which turns email into a task manager. So it goes in and says, over time, what are the things you have had other mails from Magic, now he's writing you an answer. And so it's grouped into the Magic domain here. There are all these other aspects of updates or whatever, so it's kind of structured into this thing where it says, okay, there's one more of these now. So it already has this aspect of time in the app itself. But then, you could also talk about the what would be called the bold graphics in Google Speak, in terms of there are things which are recognizable across, which is these little round actionable things you press and something happens, either send a new message or if you go into the Google Maps you would navigate. But here you have a clear example of continuous design across apps because Google Maps is also reading my mail, right? So Google Maps know that I'm gonna stay at this place here in Beijing. So if I go into a Google Maps thing and I just search for Beijing, at this point, if I sort of zoom in on this part, it will go, oh yeah, this is where you're gonna stay. And it knows this. So I think this is a very, very nice way of saying it's fine with having these design patterns. And it looks like, I just apply these design patterns, but it's really how they connect. It's how they connect in time, which makes for a big difference. This thing here is continuous in the way that it's, the content is continuous. So this is music streaming. This is the BBC radio player, which is a fantastic thing, streaming in very high quality audio. And you can also see that in the design here, similar to what we had on the DTU webpage, you go in and say what this is about is conveying this sense of atmosphere. In this case here, the Proms concert hall with Royal Albert Hall with thousands of people, and that's all great. It looks wonderful, right? But then if you say, what would you want if you wanted to make a complementary design where you would involve this? So if I would turn this to the watch, it would look like this. And the first thing you would say is, doesn't look like much. I mean, you had this sort of glorious image of Royal Albert Hall, and here you have a pause button. But that's because what you really want now is, I guess, at least in my case, what I want is a remote control for my sound system. And this means that I may be cooking or something else, and I want to say, okay, maybe we should adjust the volume, which you can do here. So there are a few things you can do. They're very actionable. They're very glanceable in the way that you can easily see what they are, and they're extremely responsive. If I do this, something happens immediately. And there's also this sort of floating text on top, which will say, this is what we are playing, which is great for a streaming app, because the scenario here is that you have not necessarily selected a specific track or something, so you will have this continuous thing in time. What is it that's going on? And you could say, well, come on, you could do this on your phone also. I mean, you could adjust the volume by pressing the buttons on the side. You could click on this thing we had down here, and you could get the player up, and you could do lots of things. Yeah, I could. But it's just the case is that my phone will now be on the table, most likely. I might be cooking. And I would just sort of look at my watch, and by turning my wrist, it turns on. So, this is a completely different scenario in this sense. And it provides a real improvement in user experience that I don't need to sort of drop everything I have. I can just do this. I could even, I guess, punch the watch with my nose or something if I couldn't do it for cooking. So what this comes down to is all the ways you look at design in terms of making it optimal for the actual device. So I picked some examples here from the Apple Developer Conference 2016. So the little guy here on stage is Mike Stern, who is a UX evangelist from Apple, talking about the watch, but there are hours and hours of videos in here, so I provided the link. It's really, really interesting to see how these people work in detail with getting things right. But you maybe can see that in the background of on the stage there's this watch, and it says 2 seconds. So the whole message here is they started out doing lots of things which would maybe take like 8 seconds on a watch. You would glance, you would do something, 8 seconds have passed. Which doesn't seem like much, but it's not great in terms of user experience if you could get it down to 2 seconds. And that's the message here. They reworked completely the design of the watch. The watch looks the same. The software inside is completely different now. There are things which look the same, but in terms of interaction and improving the user experience, this is a huge advance, right? If you can cut down time from 8 seconds to 2 seconds, that's really responsive. So that's why they put up these 3 things, saying when you create stuff which will run on, let's say, an iPhone and an Apple Watch, what you want to concentrate on is that you distribute it in a way that what comes up on the watch is glanceable. You can immediately see what it is. You can immediately react to it. It's responsive, and it's actionable. There are some easy ways to do this. So you could say the first, if you've seen or have an Apple Watch, the first way they would approach the watch like a year ago would be like, it's just another version, smaller, of a phone. And that means all the little apps are little icons, and it's actually very nice interfacing in the way that it's very smooth and it scales. So the little icons will get bigger or smaller when you touch them, but it's very unpractical because they're so small that you're very likely to hit another one than the one you intended. That means it might be glanceable, you can see the things, but it's not very actionable because you press something else. And even worse, it's not very responsive because this would launch an app, which would take time because this is a device with limited memory and so on, so it would not be a great user experience. What they have now is actually quite different. It doesn't need to look like this. This is just the way I've customized my watch interface. But you can see that it has this thing with the music player down here. So this is something which is immediately accessible. And once I press this, I get into my remote control interface, which is that I can control the volume. I can actually control the volume here with the little digital crown. So that's another way of metaphor, using these types of little dials for doing something physically. And if I want to change to another app, I don't have to go out to this thing which had lots of little colored things, and I would press one and I wait forever. Now they have what they call the dock, which is that you press another little button here, and it puts you one level down, and that's just one level. And here you can sort of go squeeze the different apps back and forth. So I have an workout app here, which is a green one, and there will be some other things here on the other side. But these are like, let's say, the 10 most frequently used apps, which will be here. They will be in memory, so they don't need to be launched. You can just sort of press them and they will pop up. So it's a question, of course, of thinking of what is a hierarchy in terms of the design patterns and what actions are enabling something. But what is totally important here is what is the overall experience, which is I can just press once, I'm down here, I press this, it reacts. It's not like I do this and I wait forever. So very, very big difference in way to think of how to design. And I think you again need to remember that this has taken them a year with real users. So what we're talking about is the rapid prototyping. You try and figure out with mock-ups, how should we do this? You try and remove as many of the problems, obstacles as possible by testing it with users. But it's only when you get a product launched, which would in this case mean when they launched Watch OS 1, you could have real users working with the watch and they would all complain about this being slow or whatever. And from that on, they would think, how can we improve on these aspects? So iteratively, they would change some of it in OS 2. And in OS 3, a year after this is totally different now. So let me just explain what the watch is all about. Is not just a watch. Let's say it's also a watch. But you can see here, 6:45 in the morning, not much is happening. There are these 3 little dots here. Now, a little later, 10 minutes past 8, I've been out running. I've taken a shower. So this is the green one, and you can see the information here in the green one is, of course, I've done some activity, but you can also see that the circle is only half filled. So there's also something here about a goal which has been set and partly fulfilled. You could see parallel goals. The red one is how many calories are burned from this activity, and the little blue one is how many times do I stand up during the day. I actually stand up most of the time, but the sensor doesn't always get that, so that can be a little annoying, right? But this is what is called complications normally in an analog watch. Complications are the little dials with a stopwatch or a moon phase, which are within the main phase of the watch. And here they work in time. So there's a little cloud with the sun peeking up over E. And then there's the calendar here saying your next event is at 1 o'clock. And I have my Apple Music player down here so I can stream music. If we look at the complementary design aspects, like, okay, this is what you wanted on the watch. What is it that you have on the phone then you can see the activity app. The similar thing on the phone now looks totally different, because here what you would like maybe is this overview over a whole month where you can see what activity patterns do you have, how do they change depending on you going abroad, traveling for some days, or on the weekends or whatever. You can see this here. Going back to the watch, moving in time, I've now been on my bike going to work, and you can see the weather has changed up there. Now there's a little cloud, and if I press this, I will see, okay, there might be a cloud now, but in time, how is this gonna change? So by now I think you gather, this is not a watch in terms of what time is it. It's a watch in terms of a whole sequence of events over a day, patterns of behavior over a day, and if you go into your phone, months, years, whatever. But it's this type of logging of what's happening. So there's that aspect to it. But there's of course also the aspect that I could go in and respond to something. So if I would press the little thing with the calendar, I would get a task list of calendar events. But what is smart about the watch is the way it communicates with you. It has this little haptic engine, and there are many ways you can check out the human interface guidelines here for how many ways a watch could actually convey message by just vibrating slightly. And it does this, so it's the watch talking to you. It's not you going in and saying, oh, I need to figure out when is the next event or something like this. And the phone could of course do this also, but that would mean you would have to reach into your pocket most likely and take it out and so on. Here you can do this in a very, very quick thing. So it will do this, it vibrates your look, and if you just look at it, the whole thing here has been designed to only show the first. So this is what is called short look. And what you have there is like maybe the information, if you designed it well enough, is enough for you to alert and see there was an update of an event or something like this. If you keep your wrist here, so there's this interaction between the accelerometer and what happens in terms of content, then it means you want to look at more, and then you would see these other things coming. So you could actually again use the crown, you could scroll, you would get more information. Could be a meeting like, oh, where does it take place? Oh yeah, that room, I know. Or you could maybe, it would maybe be a change. A calendar event has been changed. Oh, it's so, okay, I will respond to it. So there are little actionable, very glanceable options here. You reply, doing this, that, and it's all pre-configured, so it's very fast, very responsive. And you could say this way of doing things is very similar to what we have up here. I should probably get this from here. So there are these little calendar pop-ups. On my Mac here, it will pop up like, okay, this has arrived, and you should pay attention to this. I shouldn't really, right? Because I'm talking to you now. Why should I sit here and pay attention to this calendar event up here? So that's why it's much smarter. It works on the watch because it will do it in time, in the context. And this thing about how to do things in the real context is also what you have in what is actually the map. But the map doesn't look like the map. This is more like, what would you use a map for, which is real-time navigation. So in this case, I can go in and I can pick, I want to go home. Or I could say I want to go to work, because this is what people often do. Or I could search for another place where I wanted to go to. And then it will calculate, okay, how should you get there? So it will think you want to go home and you want to go by car. which means that it will then have this route, which is not a map now, but is little events which pop up and say, now you should turn left, now you should turn right. So it will just, you go on your, in this case, your bike. I'm not in a car, so it will recalculate, oh, he's going in the wrong direction, and then we figure out, oh, no, it actually works, he's just going not on the freeway, but along the coast. And this means that it will recalculate all these little steps, and it will all the time say, no, turn left, turn right, and do this in a way which is totally suited to this device. If I would open my phone, I would see a map. But I don't want to do this. I want to keep my hands on the steering wheel, and that's why you could say this is a much better solution. Other things you might want to do is, of course, stay in contact with people. So messaging, it could be all sorts of apps. But also, let's say I get off my bike and I turn off the alarm system on my phone. I put my phone in the pocket and I walk with my bike. Then the watch will go, and I look at it and it will say system in disarm. So it's safe to open the door without the alarm going wee, wee, wee. And it's just that they have used the standard interface, as you can see. So this invites me to start talking to my alarm system, so I could send a smiley or voice messages or all sorts of things. Not so likely. There's also a way to scribble things. So you can make little drawings on the screen and so on. So you can see these things are not really intended for talking to your alarm system. This is staying in contact with somebody you care about, and you want to have fun, and you want to make this an easy way to express these things. And you can do this in a very simple way, with things being highly glanceable, very actionable, and totally responsive like this. And if we look at if I press the watch face after the whole day, so you can see by now we're close to midnight, turns out I have outperformed my goals, right? You can see how many percent I have been running and biking around like crazy here. There's some stats on this, and you can also have them as numbers. So this is like one continuous scroll. You don't have to go any further. You can actually see there's a little white breadcrumb down here, which indicates there is something to the right, but it's not another part of the interface. What it is actually a possibility to share this information with somebody. So we are back again to the messaging things. It's about staying in contact, it's about sharing things with other people. Or that's all what it does here. But this thing here is actually quite interesting, because you could look at it like, okay, these are just stats, but you could translate them into behavioral patterns. You can see, if you look at the green one, I get up in the morning, I go running, then I take a shower, then I'm on my bike, and then I will be in the office, and you can see on the blue ones how many hours I'm standing. I'm actually standing most of the time, but it kind of indicates that I'm steady. I'm standing at my desk, and then around lunch, time to get something to eat, I move around. There's also some meetings around lunchtime, and then I will get on my bike again. So we can see this, and I would go someplace. Here it's actually wine tasting with some friends, and we have dinner, and at the end I will get up on my bike again, and I will bike home. So this is a way where you could say the physical sensors here, the accelerometer, heart rate, and so on, tries to grasp what's going on. And you could look at this as, you could create similar patterns for the way you interact with other apps, the way you would interact, say, with the music streaming, or the way you would interact with what people would you message, would you respond to, and so on. You can make a complete picture of what is somebody doing throughout a day to create behavioral patterns. And then I think it starts to get way, way more interesting. So these sort of behavioral patterns is, I think, something we'll talk more about in the next lectures, but I think something you could try look at already now and say, if you try and work on the app concept you have right now, which is just an app smartphone prototype thing. Then say, okay, in a structured way, look at what are the consistent things, the continuous things, the complementary aspects which would make the combination of the two, the watch and the smartphone, more than the sum of the parts. What would that be? What would be the concept where you could actually enhance the functionality, provide a greater user experience? And by doing this, again, you would just say, okay, there are these three aspects we need to take care of. It has to be glanceable. That means like 2 seconds you can look at something and you can either ignore it or acknowledge it. It could be actionable. You look at it for a couple of seconds, you do something. And that could be responding to somebody, create new contacts, patterns, whatever, or indicate how much you like something or whatever it is. And then see how this all turns into something which is like a temporal sequence, a behavioral thing, not just I push a button, but whenever I push buttons, whenever I move around, whenever I interact with my running shoes or my bike or my music player or the people I care about, this creates little digital footprints. And these are the ones which we'll talk a lot more about in the next